And the objective of the convention are multifold. So the first thing is you're trying to unify the members of your party. You're trying to unify the members of your party. So in 2016, Hillary Clinton was a Democratic nominee, but she had a significant problem with Sanders supporters. So she knew that she had to use the convention to try and bring Sanders supporters on board. And some say she was less than successful in doing that, which might have cost her the election. On the Republican side, Trump had run a very bruising campaign against Cruz and Bush and Kasich and other kinds of people. And he tried to bring the Republicans together, some successfully, like Cruz was successful and finally did come aboard, whereas Kasich was less successful and Bush was less successful. So that's the first thing that you're trying to do at the convention. You're trying to unify the members of your party after a bruising nomination process. The second thing you're trying to do is develop a winning general election strategy. So what are the issues you're going to run on and why? And the issues for the general could be very different than the issues you had to run on for the primary. So obviously, one of the things that Donald Trump did was he went on the attack against Hillary Clinton. Lock her up. Remember, that was the big cheer. Lock her up. Lock her up. And it was very successful because, according to the original polls, Hillary Clinton was ahead. So he knew he had to do something to diminish her standing among voters in the United States. And he was very successful in being able to do that among many. The other thing that happens at the convention is when you formally introduce your vice presidential choice. So this is where, for example, Donald Trump introduced us to Pence. And then you want to energize your party regulars. You want them to go back to their state and work hard for your election. Now, once we get past the nomination stage for the president, then you have the general election. And the general election works differently than it does for Congress. It's not a plurality vote. If it were a plurality vote, Hillary Clinton would be president right now because she got more votes. But instead, what we use in the United States is something called the Electoral College. The Electoral College. Now, what the heck is the Electoral College? Well, the Electoral College is a system that was developed in the United States Constitution. So what we're saying is, strictly speaking, voters don't really vote for president when they vote. Instead, when they are voting, they choose their state members to the Electoral College. And as I said, this is part of the Constitution. Article 2, Section 1 of the United States Constitution says each state has as many votes as it has senators and representatives. So when you want to know how many electoral votes does a state have, all you do is you add up their senators. Every state has 2 senators. Every state has at least 1 state rep. So the least you can have is 3. But depending upon how big your state is, you can have a lot more than that. So California, in the last election, had 55 electoral votes, which was the most of any state. So as of right now, when you add up all the electoral votes by state representatives, which are 435, senators, which is 100, and then 3 votes for the District of Columbia, you have 538 electoral college votes. So what does that mean? Well, according to the United States Constitution, you need a majority. So whichever candidate gets 270, and that's the magic number, becomes President of the United States, even if they lose the popular vote, like what happened in this past election. If no candidate receives a majority, so for example, let's say, I don't know, Bernie Sanders decides to run as a third-party candidate, or Mitt Romney decides to run as a third-party candidate, and they're able to win 4 or 5 states, so that no candidate gets 270 votes. What happens then? Well, again, according to the Constitution, if no candidate receives a majority, the election is then thrown into the U.S. House of Representatives, and the House votes by state, with each state casting 1 vote. And whoever receives the majority becomes President of the United States. Now, this has actually happened a few times in our history, 1800 and 1824. But it's very rare. So what you need is 270 votes. And again, the question becomes, how does that affect a candidate's strategy for becoming President of the United States? Well, in some ways it's similar to the nomination strategy, but it's a little different. First of all, clearly you want to go to big states because they have more electoral votes. But the question then is, do you want to go to every big state? So if you're Donald Trump, we know that California has the most electoral votes. It has 55. Do you want to spend a lot of time in California? Well, all the polling there shows that you're not going to win California. You're way behind in California. So if you're Donald Trump, you're saying, you know what, the heck with California. Yeah, it's a big state, but I'm not going to win it. So I'm not going to spend my time nor money there. I'm going to go to big states where I can win. Now, if you just did a big state strategy, just to give you a sense, the 8 largest states, California, Texas, New York, Florida, Pennsylvania, Illinois, so forth and so on, 8 states alone would give you 225 of the 270 electoral votes. And if you won the 11 largest states, you would get 270 electoral votes. So in other words, you could lose 39 states and become President of the United States. Now, having said that, not all big states are the same, as we said. So we know that California and New York is very different than Texas and Georgia. So as a candidate, you have to figure out, what states can I win? Now, once you figure that out, then you ask the question, what states are close? So I am going to go to the biggest close states. If I'm way ahead, if I'm 20 points up in Alabama or Georgia, I'm not going to bother, if I'm President Trump, going to those states. I've got those in the bag. But if Florida is very close, which the polls show it is, I'm going to spend a lot of time in Florida. As a matter of fact, that's why I changed my residency from New York, which I've been a resident of New York for 70 years, to the state of Florida all of a sudden. Now, President Trump likes to tell everybody he's a resident of Florida. So you want to go to big states that are close. So traditionally, what are some big states that are close? Well, Florida, Michigan, Ohio, Pennsylvania. Those are the kinds of states. The Midwest becomes a battleground. And you will see, as the election gets closer and closer, that President Trump and Joe Biden are going to be spending a lot of time in states like Wisconsin, Minnesota, Michigan, and Ohio, and Pennsylvania, because those are going to be considered the battleground states. The South is pretty much decided for Trump. The big states of New York and California are pretty much going to be decided for Biden. And then the rest is going to be the battlefield. So that's the way it works. And I think we'll stop here. And then next time that I do a lecture, we will continue on to talk about interest groups. So please read the interest groups chapter, which is chapter 10. Thank you, and have a good time and stay safe.